I would like to start in Hebrews, the 8th chapter. Hebrews chapter 8, because there is a reference here. We'll begin reading in verse 1. Hebrews chapter 8, verse 1. Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such a high priest, who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord pitched and not man. What we will be looking at is the tabernacle as put together by Moses and the Israelites in the time period of the Exodus. Let's read on though. There is a heavenly tabernacle that God pitched and not man. Verse 3, for every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices, wherefore it is of necessity that this man have somewhat also to offer. For if he were on earth, he should not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the law, who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. For, see, says he, that you make all things according to the pattern showed to you in the mount. And so as we go through these slides, which are one man's interpretation of what the tabernacle looked like, and some of them I rather like, and some of them I don't like particularly, but it at least gives us one look. And when we see it, it's a little easier for us to wrap our minds around what the tabernacle might have been like. So if you look at this, this shows the tabernacle with a morning sacrifice going on. You have the tabernacle in the background. You have the court of the tabernacle around, and we'll discuss that as we go. With the sacrifice, that's a brazen altar that you see the fire on in front. Let's see if I can get this to work properly. Aha, yes. This came from a book by Paul Keene that is entitled The Tabernacle of God in the Wilderness of Sinai. Now, one of the first things you see is the Ark of the Covenant with the cherubim, and I do not like that image of the Ark of the cherubim the way he presents it. But Paul Keene did a fantastic job overall researching the tabernacle. This book was in the Ambassador College Big Sandy Library, and for a limited number of volumes, including the one that was in the library, he felt so strongly that it be done right that it was originally printed with squares for the pictures on the pages. And then he went and printed to very exacting measures each photograph and had them pasted into the volume one by one. So he was really serious about this when he did it. You can just imagine. Now, he also published some in a little more mass market that included them just normal printing. This image shows the tabernacle in place. I'll try to use my pointer. Yeah, I can. Can you see that pointer at all? Down toward there? I think I'll just forget the pointer because it's not quite bright enough. That's all right. The tabernacle in place with the outer court and the instruments in place. If you look at the length of that, it's 75 feet wide and 150 feet in length if you accept the cubit as being 1.5 feet per cubit. You can read the actual dimensions in the book of Exodus in the citation I have there for you. The gate curtain was made of finely woven fabric with 4 primary colors. They were blue, they were purple, they were scarlet, and white. And we'll see that a little bit later when I look at some of the inner curtains. The pillar of the outside court that went around the tabernacle was made of acacia wood. It is 7.5 feet tall. That means that nobody walking by, unless they were Goliath or someone like that, could just peer inside that partition. 7.5 feet tall. It was fitted with silver hooks on which hung the curtain of the outer court, and then there was a cap of silver. Now that's going to be important as we go forward. The acacia wood was not covered. It was capped with silver and had the hooks of silver. Might help if I point the right direction, by the way. It doesn't help if I point at the screen. Is that right, Andrew? The brazen altar. Brazen meaning that it was made of brass. It had acacia wood once again, and then it was overlaid with brass. If you see the location, it was in the court between the tabernacle. The entrance of the tabernacle is straight behind, and then halfway between the tabernacle and the one curtain, that's the only place you got to go inside the actual court of the tabernacle, was through that curtain area right there. Let's see. That's a close-up of the brazen altar at use. It was at the time of the morning sacrifice. There, I don't know if you can tell, there is a laver there that held water. After every one of the services, be it what it may, the priests were to wash their hands and then go and do the next thing. If you look at the next, you have the look from the front gate toward the tabernacle in the background. Now you'll notice that the brazen altar is elevated. It had a ramp of earth on each side, and then there was an opening, that black area that's below the brazen altar, an opening there for a couple of obvious reasons. As they had burnt offerings, that's where the ash would go. Also, another possible reason I've heard people have conjecture on is that it was raised because if you think of that 7.5 foot height of the curtains going around the tabernacle, if that's raised, people could see the blaze of the offerings as they happened. And so it was something that they would be able to know what was going on without having to actually be inside there. Next, we have the instruments inside the holy place. Now, the tabernacle itself was made up of 2 compartments. The first compartment that you entered was called the holy place. It was approximately 2/3 of the entirety of the tabernacle. Inside the holy place were certain instruments that God commanded they be there. The first was the candlestick. Some would call it the candelabra. It was not a menorah as such. The golden candlestick had 6 branches that were made of one piece. If you look at it and count the knobs, there was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 on those. So there were 18 of those knobs, and then there were 4 up the center, 22 total. What did they do with that? Well, they, of course, lit the candelabra every evening, and then they extinguished it in the morning so that there was always light within the tabernacle, within the holy place. Another instrument, the golden, by the way, I need to back that up one. If I can get it to do it. There it goes. If you look at that, that was made of 1 talent of gold. Different ideas of different amounts of gold. One that I found said it was approximately 66 pounds of gold that this was made out of. And so you can imagine moving that around, and you had to be very careful with it, obviously. And of course, each of those top bowls held oil that was then lit every evening and extinguished in the morning. The table of showbread, it was adorned with a decorative border, and it was about a hand's breadth. If you look at the height of that border going up, it's about as wide as your hand this way. And that was made also of gold. On the table was placed 2 stacks of bread, which were replaced every Sabbath with fresh loaves. The golden bowls was full of powdered incense, and they were placed on top of the stacks of bread. So that's what you see up there on the very top. Gold, once again. Remember that outside was silver and brass. Inside, from that point on, it's gold. Now this shows the vessels of the holy place at the left and the altar of incense at the right. The altar of incense was placed directly in front of the curtain that led into the Holy of Holies. So every time incense was offered on that call it an altar, that was symbolizing going all the way to the throne of God. Many of you know that in the book of Revelation, it talks about our prayers being like that incense. And just like that incense, kind of, if you think of it wafting inside the Holy of Holies, the same way our prayers go before the throne of God in the third heaven. The incense altar was again fashioned from acacia wood, but this time it was overlaid with fine gold. A golden wreath decorated the cover with 4 horns. They call the horns the parts that stick up at the corners. And then, of course, it had 2 rings, which had poles in it for transporting it. Those poles were made of acacia wood. Acacia wood was think of it as being one of the longest lasting woods that were at that time. And then, once again, overlaid with pure gold. So now, if you look down, if you're able to look down into the tabernacle, you see where the various instruments laid. You had if you entered from this side, which would be the east side going upward, you would have the candlestick on one side, you'd have the table of showbread on the other side, and then the altar of incense directly in front of you just before going into the Holy of Holies. All of those are overlaid with pure gold. The Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant with its contents there. They show the rod of Aaron budding. Many people believe that the rod was an almond stick, and that the rod not only continued to bud, but actually produced almonds, even though it was not growing as we would normally think of. Secondarily, you have the 2 tables of the law that were delivered to Moses in the mount, and then thirdly, the container of manna, the so-called bread from heaven. Now, I have given messages before where I looked at these elements. I've always thought it was interesting that if you look at them individually, you can see correlations, if you will. I always think of the message coming from the manna as being God is our provider. If you look at it from the vantage point of the 2 tables of stone, He is the divine lawgiver, not that man makes up his own laws, not that Moses made up the laws, but God gave them to him. And then finally, the rod that budded, He is our leader. He's our staff and our stay. That's the way I interpret it. I know different people have given different messages looking at it different ways. But here we have the mercy seat. The mercy seat was fashioned to be able to sit on top of the Ark of the Covenant. Therefore, at least in the way I interpret it, you have to have mercy that covers all of law, because if there were no mercy, where would we go? What would we be? This particular image shows it laid down on its side. It would never be allowed to be laid down like that, obviously. When we look at it then in place, you have the ark on the bottom, the Ark of the Covenant with its crown of gold around it, then with the mercy seat above it, and the 2 cherubim looking downward toward the mercy seat. Why are they looking downward? Because on the Day of Atonement, when the blood of the Day of Atonement was sprinkled on, the mercy seat was one of the places it was sprinkled on. And so the cherubim are covering that throne just as they cover the throne of God even today. And they are reflective always of the sacrifice of Christ. Now, if you could remove the western wall, this is what you would see on the Day of Atonement. On the Day of Atonement, the only day that the high priest was allowed to go inside the Holy of Holies and conduct a service, we see somewhat of what it would look like. The Ark of the Covenant in place, the priest performing his service, which of course he had to first make an offering for himself and his household outside in order to be able to go in there in the first place. That's the difference between this high priest and the high priest that we have, the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth, in that he does not have to make an offering for himself and his family. He's already been the ultimate offering. But with the western wall removed, you get a chance to look and see what it might have looked like on the Day of Atonement when the high priest was in there. This is a look of what the tabernacle would look like, all assembled with all the coverings on it. What I want to do now is take that apart piece by piece. I want to be able to show you what went into that construction. First, the planks or the pillars of the tabernacle. They were again made of acacia wood. They were 15 feet in length. They were 2 1/4 feet wide at the bottom. Now, the King James Version calls those 2 pegs at the bottom tenons. The Complete Jewish Bible calls them hands. If you see that, I call them Lego blocks because that's what it reminded me of the first time I saw this. And if you see those 2 feet at the bottom, that's what went on those 2 Lego pieces right there. And those were made of pure silver. So 15 feet in length, 2 1/4 feet wide. The pillars, after they were made out of acacia wood, then were covered with a sheath of pure gold, every one of them. Now, I don't know how much that weighed, but I'll tell you, I've picked up a little bit of gold, and when I think of what that must have weighed in order to do as many pillars, I'll show you in a moment how many there were. That was one heavy piece of fabrication. There were 4 rings in it. I'll just point here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there was a hole in the center of it. The hole in the center of it was to add a 5th bar. If you look at those 4 ringlets, they were made to accept bars that you actually placed the pillars together with. Looking at it fashioned without a cover on it, there are 20 pillars going down the north side, the far side over there, and the south side on this side here. 20 of those pillars. Can you imagine the weight? Levites had to be some strong guys to be able to handle that. As they put them together, notice the bar once again made of acacia wood and overlaid with gold. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 bars going on the north side, which is the far side, and the south side. You don't get to see in this image the middle bar. I think I have one that will show you the middle bar. But there's the west side. Once again, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 bars going across, holding it together. So you have 4 going this side, 4 going on the back, 4 going on the side over there. May have gone one too far. Okay, right here. Notice the hole in the center. That's the 5th bar. And if you, I don't know if there are any engineers here, and I am no engineer, but I have made a lot of, you remember the old toys that you put together that had all the sprockets and you put them together? Well, the more of those sprockets you have together, the stronger and the more stable that is. That had 5 bars going through it that had to weigh a lot. going through pillars that weighed a lot. An earthquake would not take that down. It absolutely would not. So now we're going to move back to the front of the tabernacle. Across the front of the tabernacle, I think I have an image here. Come on. Okay. Could you advance that one, please, Andrew? The front of the tabernacle, you see the pillars there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll show you now what those pillars are. Back one image, Andrew. Those were made, once again, of acacia wood. They were sheathed in gold and had a gold crown on top. This time there was, again, one of those Lego prongs, and it was what the gold crown set down on. On the bottom, those were also this time gold, not silver. Nope. This has ceased working, Andrew. Would you advance that one, please? So this is what it looked like. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that curtain right there. That curtain is the curtain as represented by Paul Keene as what he thought the curtain would look like as you enter the holy place. Not the Holy of Holies, but the holy place. I don't like the all-seeing eye in the middle. And so please disregard the all-seeing eye in the middle. I don't think that that's a fair representation. It talks about in the Scriptures, including Revelation, about the eyes of God go all over, but I don't think it was necessarily in the entrance to the holy place. Now, that being said, notice that the all-seeing eye was covered by that middle panel. Just an aside. Now, I do want you to notice, however, the color scheme. Once again, there was blue, purple, scarlet or red, and white. Now, I'm trying not to turn to too much here, but I do want to turn to Exodus chapter 26 because some people get it a little bit confused because of the wording there. In Exodus chapter 26. Once again, I would encourage you to take the handout and actually read about it because there's a lot that can be learned from the tabernacle itself. Exodus, the 26th chapter, verse 31. It says, "And you shall make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen of cunning work." Now, this is the one that would be the one entering the Holy of Holies back there, that he is represented as the cherubim back there. But all of them had that same wording. Once again, it said blue, purple, scarlet, and fine twined linen. And so a lot of people look at that and say, well, where does he come up with the white? Well, actually, the word linen in Hebrew indicates a white, very fine linen. And so that's where you get the white. Even though it does not say white, it really does include white there. Now, a lot of people have given different ideas of why those four colors. I've had some people who thought that the use of any red was just wrong because the great whore that's mentioned in the book of Revelation wears red. However, one interpretation that I do kind of like is this, that the blue signified the divine origin of the being who became the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. The purple was signifying his destiny to be King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the royal color of purple. Red or crimson, signifying his role as our expiating sacrifice, the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And finally, white, signifying his purity, his sinlessness. Those four, like I say, I like that interpretation. I'm sure that different people have different interpretations of that, but that's the one that I like best. Advance one, please. Trying not to get ahead of myself. Advance one more, please. Okay, and one more now. Okay. This is the 10-part cherubim curtain that was named the dwelling place. This actually hung over the top of the tabernacle. Altogether, it was 42 feet long, 6 feet wide. That was one panel. In other words, one of those panels was 42 feet long, 6 feet wide. So if you have 10 panels, you have 60 feet approximately altogether. They were put together, one more, please, Andrew. They were put together by golden, what is called in the King James, taches. They were golden ringlets that had the pieces woven together one by one. Back up one now, Andrew. That's what that centerpiece is. To put all of them together, you had that in the very center. Now advance one. And again. That's what it would look like if it overlaid, as it overlaid the tabernacle. Notice that, laying that way, that covering, that again was considered to be the actual dwelling place. That's what it was called, the dwelling place, was the covering. Notice that it was not allowed to touch the ground. It was not allowed to go all the way. So if you look at the width of the tabernacle and then the height, and the height that was under the 42 feet. That was under 42 feet altogether. And the back also was not allowed to touch the ground. Again, preserving the most important part of the covering. The next slide, please. The second part of it was the goatskin curtain. In this case, instead of 10 pieces, if you could count them, you would 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but then after the middle section, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So instead of 10 pieces, you had 11 pieces. That allowed it to be covered all together, side by side, and the entire length of the back, and cover the cherubim covering. This time, those middle taches, that middle part that put those two parts together, instead of being gold, that's made of bronze rather than gold. Again, it'll be important in a moment. The next one, that is the ram skin. Ram skin that was dyed red, blood red. I think it's easy to ascertain why it might be dyed blood red, obviously, in direct reference to the sacrifices, and later the ultimate sacrifice of Christ himself. The ram skin was staked out. Instead of allowing it to droop, it actually was staked out. The next one, the next image is, now this is an interesting little aside. It is called in the King James Version badger skin. Okay, there's a problem with it being badger skin. The greatest problem was that there were no badgers in the near Middle East. And so why it was called that, I have read a bit about the etymology of the word in the Hebrew, and some think it's because of similarity of the word that is used there and to a word that might be construed as being a small mammal that could be skinned and then turned into a great piece like this. Now, I have a problem with that on several levels, not only the issue that there were no badgers there. The other part is that meant that someone had to kill, to clean, to tan an unclean animal that then was placed over the top of the tabernacle, covering the entire thing. What was it? Well, Some translations call it a sea cow. There's an actual mammal over on the Mediterranean coast that's called a sea cow, and some call it seal skin. For some of the same reasons, I'm first not sure where they would have run across a sea cow out in the wilderness, nor a seal. Now, the Complete Jewish Bible translates that as fine leather. Fine leather. And I think that's closer to it. Why would fine leather be an important aspect on the outer part? Sheath from rain, sheath from weather. You know, there are those who believe, and I think that it's probably true, that when the priests were serving in their courses, it's called, that they actually stayed inside the courtyard to carry out their various duties, and they slept underneath that tent-like stake that goes out that way. So it protected them as well. Fine leather could have been made from cattle. It could have been made from sheep. I don't think it was sheep because the ram skin already was directly mentioned. Whether it was cattle, now I raise cattle, and I know that cattle can be turned into fine leather. Some, and I read one commentary that said that the top leather, this has it rather brown, and most leather is that way. Some believe that it actually was a blue coating on top, whether it was, I don't know how they put it there, but they said that from a long distance, this is ancient Jewish tradition, that from a long distance, the tabernacle was almost indiscernible from where it stopped and the sky began. Whether that's true or not, I was not there. If any of you were, please come to me and tell me what it really looked like, because I don't know for sure. Now, if you looked at those four, give me another slide, Andrew. If you look at those four, now it was never like this, but this gives you an idea of those four coverings. The cherubim covering, the goat covering, the ram covering, and then the fine leather covering as a whole. And each one is getting a little coarser as it goes out. Not coarse in the sense of being ugly, but coarse in the sense of being a little less finely done as it moves out. One more slide, please. So that's what the whole piece looks like. The message that will follow, we're going to have, I'm a little bit unsure, but I think we have a small break now. And then afterwards, I will have the main message that ties directly to this. And as I say, I hope you enjoyed this kind of quick look at the various parts of the tabernacle in the wilderness. And Mr. Haver, do I just ask a blessing here? Okay, I think that's what happens now. Sorry, y'all. Bow your heads, please. Our Father in heaven, we realize, Father, that you gave our forebears instructions that actually mirrored those things which are in the third heaven. We know that there is an ark of the covenant in the third heaven. We know that there is a mercy seat in the third heaven. We are so thankful that you are our lawgiver, but that you also are merciful to us, and that mercy is extended to us through the sacrifice of your Son seated at your right hand. We thank you because we know that there is so much that we can learn from these shadows of things to come, that we can learn from them and carry with us in our spiritual lives. We ask, Father, as we have a short break here, that you would bless every person with understanding, that you have each of us be able to open our minds and our ears to these words from your law, and that you help us to understand fully some of the very important parallels between the tabernacle and the wilderness and in our own spiritual lives. We ask this all, saying it all, in the name of your Son and our Savior, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen.